It is 7 o'clock. Top of the hour. Too hot to be sour. None other than the man with the musical power. Ready to talk for one solid hour. Me, Malcolm Tent, coming at you live on Facebook. And soon to be archived forever and ever and ever on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome. Welcome to all who have chosen to be a part of my permanent record tonight. Yes, indeedy do. It's been a pretty good week for Old Man Tent. As I speak these words live, the date is September 30th, 2020, and last week was my birthday. And I have to thank everybody who sent me birthday greetings, either via Facebook or via the U.S. mail. Look at this. Birthday cards. I got birthday cards. People actually sent me cards. Isn't that cool? They used the P.O. Box, Malcolm Tent. P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. Take note, because I can't help but admit I just love getting stuff in the mail. I've even gone to give you the courtesy of posting my mailing address right there along with my PayPal. And of course the fact that I'm on Discogs and eBay. I'm all over the place. Hello to Jailski, my BFF in Florida. Hello, Mr. James Pogo, right up here in the Northeastern Kingdom. And Ray, the most badass school teacher I've ever met. Hi, everybody. And everybody else who's tuned in. Yeah, I seriously can't thank you guys enough. The birthday broadcast last week where I played my Starvation box got record numbers of views. And lots and lots of positive feedback. So really, really appreciate that. Hello, Marvin. Hello, Pear from Sweden. We got now officially 2 continents represented on this week's episode of Tent Talks Tunes. Excellent. Glad to have you guys here. Since I did mention already that I love to have people send me stuff to my P.O. Box, 3626 Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. Hello, Trusty Nathan Trusty. Thanks for tuning in. I want to show you some stuff that came in recently that I'm totally stoked about. This wasn't actually mailed to me, but I picked this up at a secret gig recently. It was this really cool outdoor gig on a great big farm in upstate New York. And it was very easy for everybody to stay apart and, breathe nothing but fresh air. Awesome show. And one of the bands playing were my old pals in the Armed Delight Rifles. And they gave me this album. Check out the title of this. Flux Idea for Cover. And look at the cover. That's a real paintbrush. Flux Idea for Cover. Is that conceptually brilliant or what? It's conceptually brilliant. Yoko Ono would be so proud of this right now, as would anybody from the original downtown art scene. This is a great band. I haven't played this record yet, but I'm going to very soon, and I can't wait to hear it. They also gave me another album, the Revel in the Beauty of the Sour Note. Another great album title with great hand-drawn cover art by my pals, the Armed Delight Rifles. I really, really like these guys live. Can't wait to hear the record. A band I have seen live also, like Armed Delight Rifles, who sent me a birthday gift. Oh boy, this is cool stuff. The Wrath of Typhon. Yes, Wrath of Typhon. Hope you guys can see this without the reflection. The almighty Anti-Scene played a gig with these guys at the annual Rule Breakers Ball in San Antonio, and they rocked the damn house. They were great. These guys are real students of hard rock and heavy metal, and they put their lessons to work to make some really awesome music. Put on a heck of a show, too. So Wrath of Typhon, thank you guys for the birthday vinyl and CD. Once WNHU in West Haven is finally open again and I can go down there and do my radio show, I guarantee airplay, for that, because I already know the bands are good and I love them. Now, I don't know if I can guarantee airplay on this stuff, because this is weird. My main man, Food Fortunata, one of the numerous Sockeye alum, sent me a whole bunch of stuff, man. Look at that, the Tough Skins 7-inch, featuring the Ultimate Skinhead, the Fossil Fuel 7-inch. And if you guys know Sockeye, you know this is some pretty wacky, wild stuff, most likely. The French Werewolves, We're talking about more great high concept from America's breadbasket. This stuff is really nuts. I don't know if I'm going to... Breathalyzer, another heavy metal album. Breathalyzer. This is going to have to get the play test before I can think about playing it on the radio. Their fabulous label, Wheelchair Full of Old Men. Totally wacky, totally wonderful. And Jackhammer Records are putting out the new Anti-Scene Before I Hang split 10-inch. I've got some real cool stuff they sent me. A great big old care package with really awesome heavy-duty metal, grindcore, thrash. I don't even know what this is. I'm going to be playing all of it. I'm just glad to have gotten it, man. I'm really, really happy about this. You made my birthday even better and even more cheerful than it was already. Naked Intruder. Woo! What a name! Can't wait to hear these things and see what they're all about. So thank you guys so much for sending me this stuff and for the donations and everything. You made my entry into my 56th year on this planet uber special, mega cool, and mighty, mighty fine. I salute all of you with a fine, fine vessel of Newtown tap water. Hasn't killed me yet, so must be good. All right, let's get down to the brass gritty, shall we? The nitty tacks. Today's topic on Tent Talks Tunes is Orphaned Records. You might have seen my introductory blurb in that success has a million parents, but failure is an orphan. You could be more unkind and say that success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is a bastard. In so many ways, it's a total bastard. But somehow some albums that failed in the marketplace got a little CPR and were resurrected. And it was almost always due to record company machinations and, of course, money, 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 money. So we're going to talk about 4 of those today, and this is a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite topics here. The first one we're going to talk about is a really cool album that it kind of ties into one of my earlier topics of discussion, one of my earlier broadcasts on really amazing albums that were never even released in the USA. And there are tons of them. And I'm going to actually talk about a couple of them today inadvertently. One of them was one of the very earliest releases on the Beggar's Banquet album from 1978. It was Bega number 4. The first 2 Beggar's Banquet releases were 7-inch singles by the Lurkers. Great punk rock. I don't know what the third one was. I still, to this day, I don't know what Beggar's Banquet number 3 is. Maybe somebody out there knows. I don't know what it is. But number 4 was a full-length LP on blue vinyl by a pretty much totally unknown, I guess you could say, punk rock band called Two Boy Army. And the original cover was completely different from this. If you look it up, it's got this really weird, sort of generic-looking 70s graphic. You know, it's odd. It doesn't look like much of anything unless it's some kind of inside joke in the graphics department or some kind of inside joke in the design department. I don't know. If it's a joke, I don't get it. It just looks completely, utterly generic. Maybe that's the point. But it apparently sold out its first pressing. Then it was reissued with this iconic cover, which I'm sure y'all have seen. I'll bet there are plenty of people with tattoos of this on them somewhere. Anybody out there got a tattoo of the Two Boy Army logo? If you do, you should take a picture of it and post it. I think that'd be really cool to see. I personally don't have a tattoo anywhere on me, but if I had some kind of weird yen to get a tattoo and maybe put it on my cheek, this cheek right there, I would consider doing the Two Boy Army logo. I also might think about doing like a full facial on this one, like just get the outlines and then the eye outlines. You think so? I think I'd look pretty badass. Maybe if I knew for a fact, like an absolute fact, that I only had a few days to live and that I was going to shuffle off this mortal coil, I might do that. I might actually get the full facial Two Boy Army emulation. But I digress. This album came out in the UK in 1978 and, was never seen in the US, ever. unless it was a rather expensive import copy. I remember when I bought my copy in 1981-ish, it took an awful lot of looking, and it cost $10.99. That was expensive. Your average album then was like $6.99, maybe $7.49. So to pay $10.99 for this took a lot of dedication. And it's a really cool album. In case you didn't know, Two Boy Army consists of Gary Newman, and my camera is really awful. I hope you guys will forgive the quality of the picture here, but you know, what do you want for 20 bucks? Gary Newman, Jess Lydiard, and Paul Garnier. Gary Newman, we all know that name, right? So this is really, in essence, the first ever Gary Newman album. And it's really cool. It's not anything like you would expect Gary Newman to sound. It's actually very edgy, very scratchy, very minimal, guitar-driven, kind of punk rock album. It's got synthesizers on it, but they're mainly there for flourishes and garnishes. And the synth sounds are really heavy, but the guitar is really what drives this thing. It's this really thin, reedy, distorted punk rock guitar. And it's a good album. It's very minimal, lots of repetition. Because the production is so sparse, it might take some getting used to. But definitely cool record. Really like this one. But it never came out in the U.S. Ever. Neither did the original Two Boy Army singles. Never came out in the U.S. One record that did come out in the U.S., the second Gary Newman, second Gary Newman album to do so, was this. The Pleasure Principle. Now this album is no orphan. Everybody knows this album. This album, you know, I mean, look at that iconic photo on the front cover. It's got cars on it and a bunch of other Gary Newman classics. You know, I think Gary Newman kind of has the same, I don't want to say stigma necessarily, but the same, I'll say stigma. The same stigma of first three album syndrome. Like everybody in the universe recognizes the first three Gary Newman albums. The first Two Boy Army album, the Replicas album, and this. And then maybe people know the fourth album, Telecon, and then after that, the recognition factor drops off sharply. You know, think about the other bands who've got first three album syndrome. You know, Cheap Trick, Kiss, maybe Rush, Devo. You know, there's a million of them. So Gary Newman's definitely got first three album syndrome. It's a real good album. And of course, Cars was a massive hit. It sold millions and millions of records. All the jocks in high school who I hated and who laughed at New Wave liked the song Cars. In spite of that, it's a good song. It's a good album. So record company machinations being what they are, and the desire for money being what it is, the people at Atco Records, you can see that's who released it in the States. Atco Records, somewhere there, yep. Home of AC/DC, Iron Butterfly, Vanilla Fudge. Atco Records started casting around immediately for something they could release to make more money off of Gary Newman. It was imperative. Gary Newman's hot. The kids love him. We've got to release something more by Gary Newman. We have to. There wasn't anything except for, you guessed it, the original Two Boy Army album. After The Pleasure Principle sold millions of albums, Atco came up with a very hurried re-release of the first Two Boy Army record. And I don't have the original vinyl anymore. That's one that I had to sell a long time ago. But they took the cover and put like a really ugly, printed right on it, blurb that said, first album. And made a point of saying that it was Two Boy Army and Gary Newman. Marketing. They completely defaced the cover with that blurb on it and threw it onto the market, and it died. It died. Nobody bought it. It went pretty much straight to the cutout bins, along with all those unsold copies of The Pleasure Principle. As you can see, my copy is a cutout. Good old Atco, as most major labels do. You know what? I'm even going to change that. I'm going to say as all major labels do, as all major labels always have, got exceedingly greedy. They saw that this record was selling a ton. They figured it would sell a ton forever. So they pressed up an extra million or so. The album ran out of steam, and all of a sudden Atco is stuck with warehouses full of this thing. And so they did what they always do. They put a little notch in the corner so that legally you're not allowed to sell it for full price, and dumped them at all the discount stores and all the pharmacies and the drugstores and the cutout bins and all that. And while that was happening, after they went through all the trouble to re-release Two Boy Army, that's a great screenshot right there, isn't it? Look at that. What a screenshot. Somebody please take a picture of that and send it to me. That's great. After going through all the trouble to re-release this with a new cover, it bombed. They cut him out. They dumped him. And the follow-up album to the Pleasure Principle called Telecon was released with great fanfare. They even released a little 3-inch version of Telecon made out of bubble gum. Think about that for a second. The Chubops series, little tiny album covers with bubble gum in them. They made one of those for Gary Newman's 4th album. And they printed the lyrics to I Die, You Die on it, which is some of the most depressing lyrics you'll ever hear. Total effing downer, man. And they put that on a bubblegum package. And then probably couldn't figure out why they didn't sell 1 million of them. Even those bubblegum packages became cutouts. Those Telecon records were in the discount bins for years and years. Easily 20-something years after the album was released, and did not sell as well as first pressings of The Pleasure Principle did. As late as the early 2000s, I was still able to get them as cutouts. I can't even imagine how many of those damn things they pressed. Very, very rare, very hard to find one that's not a cutout. But they did try to take the original Two Boy Army record out of the orphanage, squeeze a few dollars out of it, and hopefully some people found it in the cutout bin for like $1.99, heard it, and fell in love with Gary Newman and or the Two Boy Army. That's how I discovered a lot of great music, was through the cutout bins. So corporate greed does kind of have its upside. Because of that sheer avarice and their complete lack of having a long-term vision of anything, a lot of great music gets made available really cheap to a lot of people. So I can't really be too irritated about it. The kind of savage irony is the cutout bin is very much alive and well, and I've done some shopping in online cutout bins, but prices for vinyl now are so high that the last 2 cutouts I bought as cheap discounted remainders cost me $17 each. But it was better than paying $58 as a first run. So let's hear it for the $17 bargain. Yay! Everybody raise another fair vessel of whatever tap water you're drinking to the $17 cutout here in the year 2020. God damn. Now Facebook's being really weird. I can't see my comments. I want to make sure you guys are still tuned in. Oh, there's the comments. You've got a lot of comments. Yeah, Nathan and Crystal, Mr. Robopuff Law, Sean, my boy. Hello, there's James and Billy Death. All right, you guys are on. I'm on. We can all see each other. We can hear each other. All is good. Okay, let's talk about another Orphaned record and the eye-popping story behind it. The year is 1973. The locale is California. The duo are a couple of long-haired hippies named Buckingham Nicks. That's Stevie and Lindsay to their respective moms and dads. Buckingham Nicks. A couple of cute California songwriters. They got the look. They got the songwriting chops. They hustled their act all over Southern California, and through sheer persistence and stick-to-itness were able to somehow land a contract with Polydor Records. You can see Polydor right there, as blurry as my stupid camera is. Polydor Records. They do this album with the cream of the LA session musicians. And they go on tour, and they work it. And the album completely dies. It goes nowhere Except, as you can see by the corner, it's not a notch, but it's a cutout. Straight to the cutout bins. A lot of reasons for that. In my opinion, the primary one being that Polydor is at best a second-tier label. Polydor is pretty huge in Europe, but it's never had much of an American presence. And even in Europe, their main stock in trade is like, German beer drinking music, schlocked music as they call it, easy listening hits for grandma and granddad, people like Hino. And I love Hino, but it's not rock and roll. Polydor has never had a real firm grip on rock and roll. I mean, the only thing resembling a hit that Polydor ever had in the U.S. that I know of was the Atlanta Rhythm section. And some of the early Eric Clapton solo stuff was out on Polydor. That's about it. So Buckingham Nicks, a couple of good-looking, hard-working kids, get the first deal they possibly can, and well, it's on a schmucky label like Polydor. And so, since Polydor really had no marketing muscle and no real way to get out there and hype this thing, it just, it died. It was just another case of they released it, kind of hoped that somebody would notice, and it died. Nobody noticed. Except in Alabama, oddly enough. And I think it was Birmingham. A radio station in Alabama totally got behind the Buckingham Nicks record and made one of those classic regional hits out of it. Like a classic FM regional local hit album in Alabama. That was the only place Buckingham Nicks ever really sold albums. There's actually a really cool bootleg tape of them playing live in Birmingham, and it's an electric show. The crowd's going nuts. It's really cool. I think another reason why maybe this album didn't take off is because it's just kind of an album. I read a book or an article by Stephen King, and he talks about how in the publishing industry you've got blockbuster books and you've got just books. Just books are the kinds you'll find at the airport or at the supermarket or at the drugstore. It's just you need to walk in there, you need to see books in the book rack. There's got to be some kind of product. There just has to be something there for the casual browser to maybe, it looks kind of interesting, just pick it up and throw it in the cart. They can't all be blockbusters. You have to have a catalog. And so the same is totally true for records. You've got your blockbuster albums, and then you've got just albums. Because people need to browse through something in the bins. You can't have 600 copies of Led Zeppelin 4. People like to look through things and see things and maybe even buy them. And I'm pretty sure the Buckingham Nicks album fell into that category. It was just an album, something to put in the bins. Polydor had no stroke whatsoever in the marketplace, and they probably didn't even really care. So Buckingham Nicks, they gave it their best shot. It didn't work. Tour is over. They go back to Los Angeles. This is about 1973, 74. And Stevie Nicks, okay, I'm going to tell y'all right now, and this might engender some controversy, I hate Stevie Nicks. I hate her voice. I think the stuff she writes about is ridiculous. As an artist, I don't like her in the slightest bit. Can't stand Stevie Nicks. Voice drives me up a tree. Having said that, she is the one who kept Buckingham Nicks alive. Because she's the one who went out and worked a bunch of crappy menial jobs to bring in the money, while Lindsey Buckingham could sit around the house and practice his guitar and write songs, jerk off, do whatever he does, eat hamburgers. Stevie Nicks actually went out and hustled and brought home the money. So, if you're going to give credit ultimately to the success of Buckingham Nicks and what they eventually became, you gotta take your hat off to Stevie Nicks because she did the work. I just wish she never opened her mouth to sing. That's all I have to say about it. I just wish she never opened her mouth to sing. Okay. So there they are in LA. She's working as a waitress. She's cleaning houses, And they're just sort of trying to keep the dream alive. Meanwhile, also in LA, you've got another band who's trying to keep their dream alive. And this is a very hard-working English boogie band. They started out as a straightforward white British blues act, and eventually morphed into kind of like a sort of groovy Southern California style boogie band, and that of course is Fleetwood Mac. Now Fleetwood Mac had been an extremely English band for a very long time, and always did respectably. They always sold enough to stay in business. They never lost any money. The record company never lost any money on them. But I guess at some point they kind of got tired of being one of those fair to middling bands and wanted to try to push things up to the next level. They didn't want to sell their 125,000 every year. They wanted to start going gold and platinum. I can't necessarily blame them. Actually, I do. I personally would have been very happy to make a nice, steady, no bullshit, no hassles, no ulcers living as a band or as a part of a band. There's nothing wrong with selling 125,000 albums every year regularly. There's nothing wrong with that, man. I think that's great. Nobody bothers you. You don't have paparazzi in your face all the time. You're not the subject of gossip magazines. You can go to the grocery store if you want. I mean, look at these guys. Any one of those people could go to the hardware store and buy a bag of nuts and bolts if they wanted to without being hassled. Especially Bob Welch. Who would even want to take a picture of that guy? But he can sell 125,000 albums a year. That's cool. I got no problem with that. But they wanted to expand operations. So to do that, they did what so many others do. They moved to L.A. E-L-L-A-Y. L.A. Fleetwood Mac moves to L.A. And it was actually Bob Welch's idea because he was a California guy. And he got the band to pick up roots and go to L.A. And they figured if they were closer to the industry, they could guide their ship a little more conscientiously. They could get some hit records. And this was going to be the hit record. This was Fleetwood Mac's first LA album. And this was the one that they were banking on being a blockbuster. Let's take a look at the production and everything on it. Produced by Fleetwood Mac and Bob Hughes. I don't know who Bob Hughes is. There's actually no names on here. No, like, heavy-duty LA names. Which might be an indication as to why this album wasn't the giant blockbuster that they wanted it to be. It's got some great tunes on it. Angel. I love this album. It's a great album. But it wasn't a blockbuster. And I think the big reason being that it was just essentially another Fleetwood Mac album. It was just another one of those albums that was fair to middling. It was going to sell 125,000. And there wasn't anything to totally put it over the top. So they were banking on this being huge. It wasn't huge. They finished the tour, go back to LA, and Bob Welch quits the band because he had just basically had enough. He didn't think he had anything to offer to the group anymore. He couldn't get them to that next level, so he quit. And this is almost at exactly the same time that Buckingham Nicks had done the same thing. It's like both Buckingham Nicks and Fleetwood Mac had given it their best shot, 1974, and it didn't quite work. And now they're back. They're both back in L.A., just kind of wondering what to do next, kind of biding their time. So Mick Fleetwood, being the irrepressible, unstoppable, true believer that he is in Fleetwood Mac, did what he has always done in times of crisis and said, we're carrying on. We're going to continue onward. Even if it's as a trio. Fleetwood and the two McVies. We're carrying on. So, they carry on. Mick Fleetwood starts making the rounds of studios in LA to try to figure out where they're going to record their next album. And they're at a studio. Don't know the name of it. But the chief engineer says, I got something you need to hear. Check this out. And puts on a tape by Buckingham Nicks. Just so happens he was good friends with Buckingham and Nicks. And actually engineered this album. I think it was Keith Olsen. Get my name right here. Keith Olsen Yes, indeedy. Or it might have been Richard Dashett. It was either Dick Dashett or Keith Olsen. I want to say Keith Olsen was at the studio and played Mick Fleetwood the tape by their friends, Buckingham Nicks. Mick Fleetwood said, I like what I hear, and I like what they're doing. The rest is hysteria. Buckingham Nicks join Fleetwood Mac, and they end up with the blockbuster that they've been looking for all along. This album right here, the White Album by Fleetwood Mac. That's the one. You got the magic synergy between the two kind of incomplete parts. Because when you listen to this album, okay, like I said before, it's an album. It's okay. It's charming. It's pleasant. But it doesn't have that sparkle. It doesn't have that oomph. You can tell that it's a room full of LA session musicians playing what they're told to play. It's like them reading off the charts and doing a very competent professional job of playing the songs. And it just sort of comes and goes. You know, it's an album. And Fleetwood Mac at the time had kind of the exact opposite problem, because Fleetwood Mac has an undeniable sound, man, and the root of it is the rhythm section of John McVie and Mick Fleetwood. Those two guys on bass and drums have an undeniable groove to them. Even, like, you know, whatever you think of albums like this from the 70s, from their, you know, pre-Buckingham Nicks era, I love them. I really love these albums. Even on some of the weaker stuff, there's just this groove, this undeniable groove, this boogie groove to Mick Fleetwood and John McVie playing together. They sound so good. So what these guys lacked was what Fleetwood Mac provided. Fleetwood Mac brought the groove, okay? And what Buckingham Nicks provided were the incredible, like, over-the-top songwriting chops and the sparkling production that Lindsey Buckingham had. Each one needed the other very badly. You would never, ever, ever have had this if it weren't for these guys joining with these guys. And the rest is hysteria. Now, of course, the minute that this album started selling tonnage, y'all know what Polydor Records did, right? Right. Even as stupid, short-sighted, harebrained, and absolutely pathetic as your average major label cog in the machine is, somehow somebody at Polydor was able to say, oh, wait, Fleetwood Mac. We have a couple of them, don't we? Yeah, I remember this one. Yeah. Re-release it, quick. Quick, get it out onto the market. Quick, oh my God, re-release it. Ah! Which they did. And it tanked. Again. Twice. Buckingham Nicks record tanked. And I think the reason is because no matter how much hoopla there was over Fleetwood Mac at the time, no matter how many records that Fleetwood Mac album sold and how many Rumors albums were sold, Buckingham Nicks are not Fleetwood Mac. Different animal. A smoother, blander, kind of pleasant version of Fleetwood Mac. So, and I remember correctly when they re-released this album, for whatever reason they did not capitalize on the Fleetwood Mac connection. I don't remember any copies of this ever saying Fleetwood Mac, you know, or contains and there might have been stickers that said the original version of Crystal as played by Fleetwood Mac. Maybe. I don't know if I remember that correctly. But I really don't remember this ever being touted as being a Fleetwood Mac related product. Once again, internet research team, if I'm wrong about this, please post photos and please comments. Please post comments because I want to know. I don't know everything. I only know these stories as I experience them. So I don't remember this being hyped at all as being related to Fleetwood Mac. And even if it were, it probably wouldn't have mattered because it just wasn't Fleetwood Mac. So they actually re-released this thing twice. The second time was in the early 80s, part of the Polydor Budget Line series. For that one, they didn't do the gatefold sleeve. They just did a regular old one-piece sleeve, and it was really chintzy. and it had like a $5.98 list price, and that one also just kind of came and went because that's what a lot of those records were supposed to do. And that's it. This record has never been re-released since. And there's been a lot of talk about it. Buckingham and Nixon said, oh, yeah, we'll probably re-release it someday. Yeah, maybe next year. They never have. They've never re-released it. It's one of those vault classics that you really can't get. I mean, it's been counterfeited and bootlegged, but as far as real, honest-to-God, legit vinyl, it hasn't been in print since 1981. That's 40 years, dudes. 40 years. So, you know, it's still an orphan. They tried to make it into a legitimate child, but it's still an orphan, still a bastard. A bastard. And if you like Fleetwood Mac, it's worth checking out. At least once. That's about all I was able to get out of it. Just saying. I'm just a consumer. What do I know? I know enough to stay hydrated. And I know enough to reach over and make sure the comments are still coming in. Alright, everybody's still with me. Looks good. I also know enough to hype my own product as I do. This is really cool, man. I only got this fairly recently. A lot of people don't know this, but I'm in a band called the Chinese Restaurants. And the Chinese Restaurants have a new album called Instant Music. And the only thing I know about this record was I got a call from the two main Chinese restaurants, Keith Restaurant and Loy Restaurant. They said, dude, we're recording an album this weekend. You want to be a part of it? I said, sure. So I went to this really cool studio in Bridgeport, and I don't even know what was going on. I was given no instructions whatsoever. I was told, well, we got this studio full of instruments. Do you want to play something? I said, yeah, I'll play that marimba over there. So I beat out something on the marimba. And they said, cool, what else do you want to play? I said, ooh, there's a timpani. I've never played a timpani before, like a full-size kettle drum with the pedal, so it goes boom. So I banged on that for a little while. And I picked up the bass guitar and fiddled around with, you know, some other percussion and stuff. Banged on some keyboards. And we did play one song called People, Let's Freak Out. One honest-to-God composition on this record. Yes, it's hype time. But anyway, yeah, I just kind of futzed around on these instruments. And they futzed around on some instruments. And said, okay, see you later. And I believe it took 2 years, but then this album came out. They took all those bits and pieces and assembled it into an album. And it's really cool. It's a really cool, weird, eccentric, it's just one of those albums that's got some kind of driving aesthetic behind it. I'm pretty sure I don't even understand it, but I like it. They pressed 200 of them on 200 on vinyl. 200, that's it. Deluxe gatefold sleeve. Deluxe inner sleeve with all kinds of pictures. Look, there's me on the marimba. There's me on the timpani. You know, there's Keith and Loy Restaurant. It's a really cool, borderline, wacky, weird-ass record, and I really like it. And I do have copies. I've got 3 copies to part with if anybody wants one. $20 post-paid. And you can find the Chinese Restaurants on their Bandcamp page. They're good dudes. They're friends of mine. I really like them. I love their aesthetic. And I'm very happy to have been a part of the Instant Music album, even though I did not have a clue as to what was going on the whole time. I think that was the idea. I'm behind it. Totally behind it. Alright, gang, we got 2 more records to talk about. And this sort of, well, you might have noticed a certain theme. The record companies take the orphan records, try to squeeze some life out of them, and they become orphans once again. Kind of sad. Kind of sad. And by the way, Billy and Robo Pufflaw, yeah, the Chinese Restaurants was an awful lot of fun. When we play gigs, it's similar. It's totally improv. I never know what's going to happen when we walk into a Chinese Restaurants gig. But it's not like Ultra Bunny. Ultra Bunny, when we do our improv stuff, is full-on space rock. It's full-on Hawkwind, Flipper, The Fall. it's just like boom. The Chinese restaurants is kind of like when we play. So much fun. And it's totally reflected on that album. So if you want one, give me a buzz. I'll be happy to hook you up. Provided the price is right. So yeah. Orphaned Records. And once again, oddly enough, we find ourselves in 1974. That seems to be kind of a key year. 1974 was an extremely unlikely hit, verging into 1975, by this really weird, quirky German band? Call them a band, I don't know. Somehow it had one of those fluke American hits. And you know what it is, you've heard it. It's Autobahn by Kraftwerk. Truly an enduring classic. Kraftwerk, Autobahn. One of the most unlikely songs ever to become a hit. The original track is 22 minutes long. Takes up an entire album side. But somehow the geniuses, and I might even be somewhat sincere, maybe, when I use that term referring to a major label, the geniuses at Vertigo Records chopped it down and made a single out of it. Check it out. An actual 45 RPM single of Autobahn by Kraftwerk. And it was a hit. It was a big hit. It's a big enough hit for Kraftwerk to tour the U.S. and sell boatloads of Autobahn. I know a lot of people whose parents bought this record. Lots of moms and dads bought Autobahn by Kraftwerk. Some grandparents bought Autobahn by Kraftwerk. Everybody bought Autobahn by Kraftwerk because it was a hit single. This is the only time I've ever seen an actual 45 RPM single on the Vertigo label. Except for, I don't know where I put it. I've got another Kraftwerk. Ah, this one. This shows you how big Kraftwerk was. The only two times I've ever seen a 45 RPM single on the Vertigo label, either in the States or overseas. That alone makes it kind of cool. You never see Vertigo 45s. Leave it now to the internet research team to start posting pictures of Vertigo 45s. I don't mind if you do. I like to have the information. I like to know what I'm talking about. But they are scarce. Can't deny that. So it was a hit. They sold a lot of records. It was cool. So, as we've already established, once the money starts coming in on one title, the label starts looking for money in the field, or as the case may be, money in the vault, and they say, what do we got? What do we got? What else can we get out by Kraftwerk? Oh, wow, these guys have 3 albums. They have 3 albums that we could release. Well, what do we got? Well, we got the first 2 Kraftwerk albums, which I don't have original copies of. I wish I did, but they're variants of that theme right there. You can see the cone with the name on it, Kraftwerk. The first 2 Kraftwerk albums. Nah, I can't re-release those because they are weird. They are fucking weird. If you guys want a weird-ass listening experience, check out the first 2 Kraftwerk albums, Kraftwerk 1 and Kraftwerk 2. This is actually a more accurate representation of what the cover of those first 2 albums looks like. First one is that color, the second one is blue. They're rare as hell. I've only ever seen one original of the first one, ever. Actually, the second one's green, sorry. Red and green. Rare as hell. Never came out in the States. The first Kraftwerk album, I would say, is legitimately, in my opinion, the first ever industrial album. It's real-life industrial music. It's all these weird squeaks and groans and creaks and hisses and clanging sounds and there's one real honest-to-God song on it called Ruckzuck, which is a killer riff song, but the rest of it is just like, it literally sounds like a giant factory in the middle of the night. It's really cool, but nowhere near commercial. So, of course, old Vertigo ain't going to touch that one. The second album, with the green cone on it, is not quite as extreme, but Yeah, it ain't gonna fly. It's definitely too damn weird for the U.S. market. One song called Atem is just the sound of somebody breathing for like 5 minutes. I'm sure somebody thought maybe they could try to make a 45 RPM single out of it, but they got nixed. Nixed, I'm telling you. So that only leaves one other album in the vault by Kraftwerk that might be re-releasable, and that is this one, Roth and Florian. So, of course, Vertigo, trying to capitalize on the success of Autobahn, presses up many, many, many copies of Roth and Florian, dumps them onto the market, and it dies. There you go. There's 3 up and 3 down re-released records that completely died because Autobahn had crested by then, and the public imagination just wasn't there. And Vertigo, to repeat sort of a common theme, was part of the Mercury Records empire, and Mercury Records was also strictly second tier. I mean, yeah, they had Rush, Bachman Turner Overdrive. It's like they kind of accidentally had a couple of really good rock bands that they could sell lots of records by, you know. The fact that Rush had as much success as they did on Mercury is a mystery to me. I can't understand how it happened, because Mercury and all of its various subsidiary labels, second tier, baby. If you were into like the Statler Brothers and Tom T. Hall, you were in luck, because that's the kind of stuff Mercury specialized in. But rock music? No way. Weird ass experimental German music? Baby. The irony being that this record is very, very accessible. It's got lots of like really light classical influences to it. It's still avant-garde and it's still weird, mind you, but there's tons of melody on here. Lots of playing of the black keys. Really sweet, sweet neoclassical melodies with a very Germanic tint to it. And it's not that far removed from Autobahn, really. You know, it's one of those deals, I think, where if the band cared enough to actually tour behind it and the record label had, you know, more of a presence in the marketplace, it could have been a hit, I think, because there's some really, really, really good listening on this album. But as we've already heard, didn't fly. And as you've already heard so many times, I discovered this in the Specs Music cutout bin for $1.99, and I loved it. Still love it to this day. And the copy I have now is a very rare one because it's actually not cut. If you look at the cover, there's not a notch or a cut corner anywhere on it. This is a really rare, like, first run copy that somebody actually paid full price for, probably on the heels of Autobahn. But not many people did it. Now, the postscript to how orphaned this record actually is, this record and the first 2 Kraftwerk albums have been out of print since 1975-ish. And the members of Kraftwerk, Roth and Florian, have stated a number of times that they don't consider their first 3 albums to be part of the official Kraftwerk canon. They have completely, utterly disowned them and have repeatedly refused to reissue them. I mean, there have always been rumors of it happening, and as I think about it, it might actually have happened on a recent record store day. And I don't follow record store day. I don't do, as I call it, record scam day. I don't do it. So yeah, maybe I'm sure somebody out there knows. Were the first 3 Kraftwerk albums reissued as part of record store day? Please chime in and let us know, because I don't know. I'd like to know. If they were, that would make it the first time in the better part of 50 years that those records were available. And it just shows you how tenacious these guys were in flat out refusing to let those records back in print. And I will vouchsafe to say that if the first 3 Kraftwerk albums were actually reissued for record store day, I'm going to guess it has something to do with the fact that Florian Schneider, one of the guiding lights of Kraftwerk, died within the last couple of years, and maybe that loosened up some of the the strictures on getting those 3 records back out. So somebody let me know if my theory is true. If it is, it still makes the story of these 3 albums a very interesting story, and the fact that 2 of them were never, ever, 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 ever released in the U.S., and 1 of them, they gave it a shot, but it wasn't a hit. Back to the Orphanage, Roth and Florian. Sorry, guys. You got to admit, the Orphanage has some of the best music going in there, running around in the halls. Kind of makes you not envy the general population at all. Let's scroll on down here to see if anybody's got some information about that record store day stuff. Now we got someone laughing at Tom T. Hall, Austin. But, yeah, no record store day information. Let's assume it never happened. Let's hope it never happened. Record store day. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. That's all. Just my opinion. All right, gang. We got one more orphan for you. One more orphan. And we've already been through this sad ringer where the greedy, absolutely, completely avaricious, rapacious record companies try to cash in on them to no avail. To no avail. We've heard it 3 times today. Will we hear it a 4th? King Curtis, Paul Jones, Mark Lewin. Will we hear the story a 4th time? Ernie Ladd, Assassin 1, Assassin 2. Will we hear the story again? Let's find out. And the question to Robopuff Law, yes, Captain Beefheart had 2 albums on Mercury. They both tanked. And I did a big, long talk about those on one of my earlier broadcasts. And that's my cue to tell everybody that my earlier broadcasts are all archived on my Facebook page. And I've also started a YouTube channel. They're not all up on the YouTube channel, but they eventually will be. So if you want to hear me yap, yammer, and extrapolate even more, all of my Tent Talks tunes are on the internet, either on Facebook or on YouTube. So go back and look up the one that has the Captain Beefheart Mercury era represented. I think it's pretty interesting. If you like Captain Beefheart, or even if you don't, the stories behind them I think are really, really interesting. Wait, did I say Mercury? Oh my God. You're not going to believe what's about to happen. More orphans on Mercury Records. Oi! Mercury is really good at creating orphans, or bastards if you want to be unkind-hearted. This dude had 3 orphan records in a row that came out in the States. And they all tanked. Every one of them tanked. The first one was called David Bowie. And that came out on the Darum Records label, a subsidiary of London Records. Guess what? Another second-tier label that had the Rolling Stones. But Darum had like the Moody Blues, and they had some early Cat Stevens stuff, and like 10 years after. So once again, in spite of themselves, Darum was able to stay afloat as a label and release some stuff that sold a few things, you know? But they had this album by this weird English cabaret singer, David Bowie, which they did release in the States, went nowhere, absolutely nowhere, because it was a very strange album. The first David Bowie album is like very, very English, very dance, not like music hall, English traditional entertainment. It is not rock and roll in the slightest bit. There is no rock and roll on the first David Bowie album. It's a lot of this very dated, archaic, like English whimsical pop music. And it's pretty easy to see why it didn't take off in the States in 1967. There just wasn't any place for it, and Darum wasn't much of a label. So it died. I've only ever seen one copy of the original David Bowie record on Darum American pressing ever. I used to own it. If I ever do a webcast on records that I used to own but don't anymore, man, I might go jump in a river after that one. Because there are some records that I used to own. Boy. The U.S. pressing of the first David Bowie record on Darum was one of them. Yep. Sure was. I'll snap out of it, don't worry. So that was Darum. Next up, you guessed it, Mercury Records in their attempt at releasing a David Bowie album. And as weak and anemic as Mercury was, from everything I've read and everything I understand, they really did try to push David Bowie. Maybe not so much with this album, which was released and vanished without a trace. And this one, I will bet you dollars to donuts, never even made it to the cutout phase either. I think they just did their initial pressing, somehow sold it. I'm sure it was a very small pressing, and that was it. They never even bothered to reprint it. So, yep. Second Orphan record by David Bowie, first on Mercury. And then the third Orphan record by David Bowie, also on Mercury, was released and completely died a death. And I have a little bit of evidence of how Mercury actually did try to promote this one a little bit anyway. There exists an extremely rare white label promo version of The Man Who Sold the World. I hope you guys can see that. There you go. You can kind of see that. This is a crown jewel in my collection, baby. This one has survived all the purges and all the years and all the ex-wives and everything. Still got this one. But Mercury tried. It's like that old country western song. Mercury tried. Mercury tried. And it didn't go anywhere. I mean, mainly because Bowie didn't tour. He did like one sort of acoustic round playing radio stations and like insider parties and stuff like that. But he never toured. So that probably had a lot to bear on the fact that he had not one, not two, but three Orphan records in the States that sold schmutz. Those first three Bowie records didn't sell jack in the U.S. Man Who Sold the World, same deal. It never even reached cutout phase. It never even got the hole drilled in it. It never got the notch in the cover. But you're going to say, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, I have one of those with this cover, and it's got a hole drilled in the front cover. You're going to say that. I know you are. Well, guess what? Those are counterfeits. If you have a copy of this album with a hole drilled in the corner, it's a counterfeit. And that's a really fascinating story in its own right. There was this operation in the 70s who counterfeited out-of-print records. That's why you see so many counterfeit versions of Introducing the Beatles. The versions of The Man Who Sold the World with the hole in them. The versions of White Light, White Heat by the Velvet Underground that have the hole but don't have the skull on the cover. Those are all counterfeits that were all produced by the same outfit. In fact, the counterfeit versions of this with the hole way outnumber the real versions without the hole. That's a fact, Jack. If you see one with a hole, it's a fake. A very well done fake, but a fake nonetheless. Real ones of these, tough to find. White label promos of these, real tough to find. Hello, Stefan, from the Antipodean regions of the globe. That's Australia, New Zealand to you people. Thanks for tuning in, dude. It's a nice early morning viewing for you. Glad you're up this early. Hello, Janice. Hello, Michael. Man, you guys are all right. Oh, wait. Here is some information on the Kraftwerk reissues from my main man, Michael Grossa, who's been a trashy for a very long time. First two Kraftwerk albums were on the original 2020 Record Store Day list and have since dropped off, and the listing from the Record Store Day site and Amazon was removed. So there you go. It would appear that the first 3 Kraftwerk albums remain orphaned. As we all know, the first 3 David Bowie albums did not stay orphaned for long because David Bowie started having hits. And he started making loot for the record companies. And that's when the record company he was on, which was RCA Records, another second-tier label that somehow managed to get sales with David Bowie in spite of themselves, reissued these 2 albums. They called this one Space Oddity, with a completely different cover. And they called this one, well, The Man Who Sold the World, with a completely different cover. And the rest is hysteria. They've been in print ever since on one label or another. They've made lots of money. So we've got a happy ending to the story. We've got some orphans who were admitted into the family and have been very proud, happy members ever since. So it's not all just grim sweeping of the dust in the orphanage. Yay! It's all right. It's totally all right. Old David Bowie did pretty good for himself. Wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you say? I'm glad we got to end the tale on a very happy, high note. I'm sure there are other orphan records out there I could yammer on about, but I'm done. My voice is getting tired. My sinuses hurt. Talking too much, you're not going to believe this, but talking too much is like physically uncomfortable for me. So I'm going to stop. So as usual, thank you everybody for tuning in. I'm glad you all dug what you heard and stuck with me for the last 61 minutes. Every week. Very happy to be here. Next week, if all goes well, I'm going to have a special musical guest. Yes, a musical guest on Tent Talks Tunes. If you're in research mode, look up Brute Force. Apple Records recording artist, Brute Force. And look up the album Confections of Love by Brute Force. Lord willing and the creeks don't rise, he's going to be my musical guest next week on Tent Talks Tunes. And that, my friends, is worth tuning in for. Woohoo! Again, don't forget to check me out on Discogs and eBay. TPOS is my label. Trash American Style is my store. Send me a postcard. P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. I love getting mail. And I love trading stuff back and forth. It's a lot of fun. Great jocularity. So yes, indeed, I do hope to be back in 167 hours' time. So until we meet again, keep your head up, keep your heels down. And his Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Nutmeg State.